thanks for coming. Well, reason for this press conference is really to give you an update because there's a lot that has transpired between the last time I spoke with you to now, but I do want to take the time, if you don't mind, to try to put it in context, as I always try to do. And then I'll have the chief come to talk about the specifics of the things that have happened over the last few days, over the week or so, okay? And the context is I want to go back to when we talked the last time around the issue of whether or not people have lost confidence and faith in our system, and particularly in these instances that we're speaking of, it would be the criminal justice system. And as I mentioned before, I believe there are three major factors in regards to that, and that is one, the belief that there's a lack of access in our society to the beneficial side of the operation of the system. And secondly, there's a legitimate concern and sentiment around the lack of justice and fairness in the system as a whole, but particularly the criminal justice system. And then finally, people just believe that no one cares about their plight or about their condition or situation. And those things, I will continue to say, are underlining factors that are helping to drive a lot of things, not just in Cleveland, but throughout this country. Now, we in Cleveland have attempted to address many of these things in the way that we can, whether it's in a broader sense around community benefits agreement, around wealth and the sharing of wealth, or the opportunity for jobs and all these kinds of things. And in the terms of the criminal justice system, we've worked pretty diligently around training, around review of policies around training, the use of deadly force. We've entered into the consent decree with the Department of Justice that I believe can give us the opportunity to do real, sustainable and substantive kind of reform that we need in order to restore this confidence that people tend to lack, and restore the faith that people no longer have in our system as a whole for the three reasons that I've stated. And then finally, transparency is, I think, a very important part of this. And that is why I continue to have these, whether it's a press conference or media availability, so that we can be transparent to you. And being transparent to you, and since you are the ones who are the format and the platform that communicates with the people, we want to be transparent to the people through you. And that helps us in that it helps to bring the clarity that I constantly talk about. One of our greatest enemies in this whole dynamics is going on, again, not just in Cleveland, but across the country, is a lack of clarity and a lot of confusion, and people with great intentions and really wanting to know what are the facts. What are the facts of this situation? What is the truth about this? Or many times have a very difficult time of getting that. So we want to help bring clarity. And there's the final part is that we are bringing that clarity not only through you, and bringing that transparency not only through you, but we're going directly to the people. And we're talking to people in numerous community meetings in different formats and different ways of doing it, but we're talking to them and answering their questions specifically so that we can help bring clarity to them. Now, I want to have the chief come up, and he'll be specific about some of the things that have happened over the last few days. But I wanted to set the framework in the context of why we're holding this press conference, so you can then, as you ask your questions, we can, and we're answering them, hopefully it's a better understanding of why we answer the questions the way we do. Okay? Chief?
Thanks, Mayor. Good afternoon. You've been covering the events of the last few days. You were here on Monday when things started to happen. As a result of the grand jury's decision, the Division of Police has started our process of reviewing administratively what happened in this incident, and we'll continue to do that. And we talked about making sure we don't add time to this already lengthy process. So we are going to expedite that as much as possible while staying within the bounds of doing it correctly. Monday also started a chain of events of people basically coming downtown and expressing their First Amendment rights. And the Division of Police, Monday and through today, and as we have done in the past, assume the same posture. We allow people to express their First Amendment rights, and we do everything we can to protect both people that are engaging in that activity, the general public, motorists, everybody else in the city, as we go through this. On Monday, there were approximately 100, maybe 120 demonstrators that showed up, and they marched through the streets of this city. And again, the men and women of the Division of Police, along with some of our partners, assisted them in doing that. And I know people are talking about the inconvenience that it caused at that time and that it continues to cause when we have these things crop up. But again, our posture is to make sure that people are allowed to express their First Amendment rights and to do it in a safe way. And even during the time that people are allowed to do that, we're engaged in, as much as humanly possible, moving traffic throughout the city and throughout the area of those demonstrations. So people do occasionally get stuck in traffic. We understand that, but our officers are working very hard to try to move that traffic as expeditiously as possible. I myself was stuck in traffic last night, and I watched things unfold, and I watched that traffic clear up. So, this is what happens in a democracy. People have the right to get out there and express themselves, and it's our job as a department, as a city, to protect them while they're doing that. As this went on Tuesday and yesterday, demonstrations kind of slowed a little as far as numbers. I think on Tuesday there were approximately 55 or 60 people. Yesterday we had approximately 45 or 50. But we still maintain the same posture as a division. We still protect people's rights to exercise their rights. And we still have to maintain protection of the public. At any time when that blocking of a roadway or when that demonstration gets to the point where it's a danger, either to the participants themselves, the general public, or the motoring public, then we exercise our due diligence and we take care of that. And you've seen some of that. There are certain things that we require during these impromptu demonstrations, and that's within the codified ordinances of the City of Cleveland. Chief of Police has the right to modify, adjust, to make sure these things are safe, and we'll continue to do that. So right now, we have information that things are going to continue to happen as we go the next few days, and we'll be prepared for it, and we will respond in the way that we responded since a lot of these things started last year. We'll protect people's First Amendment rights, we'll protect the general public, and we won't condone violence of any kind, either against persons or property. And I think we've been clear in that, and I think we've been consistent in that, and I think people understand. And I know that from my standpoint, the men and women of the Division of Police and the protesters, we haven't had anybody hurt, so we're going to stay along these lines. We're going to enforce things when we have to. We're going to keep traffic moving as much as humanly possible, and we're going to make sure everybody's safe. Mayor?
All right, questions?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Have any protesters filed for permits or have any of them contacted your office as you guys requested in July, or actually demanded in July with the new ordinance?
No, I don't think there's been a request for a permit.
No.
They're not going to do that.
And so that means that these protesters could be cited. Is there a difficulty in being able to cite these protesters for light hazards or finishes?
Well, because what we want to do is allow people to, of course we have laws that say, and we've amended our ordinance according to some of the court rulings to say, well, you have to get a permit, you have to do this. But we expect, and I'm pretty sure you expect, that people won't do that. They're protesting, you know, and most protests, if they were done in according to the rules and done in a certain ways, you probably wouldn't get much attention. So a lot of what happens in a lot of the design of the protest is to be against whatever laws may be on the book. Part of the protest is about creating inconvenience for people. It's part of getting the notice of what they're protesting about. Most protesters do not want to go somewhere and just have a nice dialogue somewhere and not be noticed. So they do those things that would cause that conflict. We understand that they haven't pulled permit. We understand that they're breaking the law by blocking the intersections. We understand that but they're doing it at rush hour so they can get the maximum effect. We understand that, but our concern is to allow for them to exercise their right. Civil disobedience in that way of breaking the law is part of protesting. You know, Chief?
Sure. As I stated earlier, the city ordinance allows the chief of police to mitigate those things. It allows the chief to to condone, not so much condone, but to let these things go forward and within certain parameters, or to shut them down. We've chosen to maintain our posture of we'll allow people to do things as long as it stays peaceful. And we have, on occasion, placed restrictions on these events to make sure they remain safe, to make sure that both the protesters and the public at large are safe when these things are happening. As the mayor stated, there's going to be some inconvenience. I was stuck in traffic last night myself for about 5 or 6 minutes. But, I mean, life itself, causes inconvenience. And, we try to do our best to make sure that that doesn't impact people's lives unnecessarily. And, downtown traffic is downtown traffic. We get caught in a Brown's traffic when we're coming in and out. This is just another form of traffic.
What about the dollars and cents of this? How long can the city of Cleveland afford to pay this many officers this much overtime to keep doing what you've been doing?
Well, we do this in a way that we minimize overtime, if any overtime at all. As the chief mentioned, the size of the demonstrations, and so it's just a matter of redeploying and resourcing in a way to do that. But this is not a financial thing for us as we consider. We regard it, if it was 1,000 people, we would do whatever is necessary to do what the chief said, to ensure that people have their right, constitutional right to protest, and to be safe in doing that, but also protect the interests of the public and property. So far, I don't think we've had that big a strain in terms of a financial strain on overtime because of the size of the demonstration and the protest and the chief's ability to redeploy people. Yes.
To the chief, do you have any idea, like a breakdown of how many of the demonstrators would be out of town? How many are local? Is there any way to tell what you're seeing out there?
Not an exact number, but we do know, at least on that second day, on Tuesday, there were some people from out of town. I'd say out of the 50, there were probably 9 or 10, maybe from out of town, that we know of. Last night, there were probably a couple that we can see that kind of identified themselves by their signs and, talking to people during the protests, interacting with our officers. People use certain language that we know people from Northeast Ohio don't use. But it's a guesstimation. But there are people that come in from out of town for these things.
Do you think we've seen the largest of the protests so far this week? Do you think they'll get larger or what the rest of the weekend?
I don't know. I mean, we've seen bigger protests in the past. We've seen smaller. it just depends on, people's, commitment to do things. It depends on, how much they want to get their message across. And I think for the most part, people have gotten their message across. We're right now, as the mayor said, we engage people all the time, and we're really trying to engage people as to, all right, what is the next step? You're getting your message out there. We're hearing you loud and clear. So how do we move forward from here? Or your ideas of making this thing better? Because we know what we're doing as an administration, as a division, to make the police department better and to help make our community better. But if you're out there advocating for certain things, what's the next step past the protests, the marches, and things like that?
What are your expectations for the number of protesters this evening, and what are the precautionary measures you've taken to prepare for anything?
Well, the chief just told me that we don't know. We don't know. Usually we're close, but there's always usually a little more than what we anticipate. So we don't want to state that because we really don't know. What we'll do is the same thing we've been doing. We will allow for protests and demonstration. The chief, as he says, has the discretion as how much he'll allow people to get outside the law or not. We know there will be inconvenience to somebody about this, but he will, again, use that discretion to ensure that people are safe, both protesters and the general public. The traffic keeps moving, and we'll just continue to do what we're doing.
There were about 100 protests the first night, less than half that yesterday.
Yeah.
Are you concerned that addressing the media and the public now might rile people up again and encourage more protesters to come out tonight?
No, I'm concerned about being transparent. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about you not having to wonder what is the mayor thinking or what is the mayor doing, what is the chief's plan and stuff like that. We're pretty clear about this stuff, even though we're redundant and you get to the point you're saying, well, what is he going to talk about now? Well, I'm going to say the same thing. And so I will always put it in that overall context about those three things about access, justice, fairness, and whether or not the system cares about people. That's what's going on. And I will also always mention the fact that as we do what we do, when the responsibility comes back to us, what we are focused on is due process, and that we're not focused on what people have attempted to do for political reasons, whatever reason, is to just put a process in place to say that I've touched the bases. It may have already had a conclusion as to what they will reach. That is what the people complain about throughout this country, that this process is flawed. There's no justice here. There's no fairness here. And I will say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that there used to be a very specific group. People usually attributed that to minorities or poor people. And they say, well, the minority and poor people feel like that the system's not functioning for them. But that group is getting much larger now, and is getting more diverse. So you just don't have minorities, you have the whole group in here. And not only, you just don't have poor people, we have people with jobs and who have some money, right? And so you're getting this sense, and this sense is growing throughout this country. It's growing. And so what we want to do as we do what we do, we want to be clear to people, and that's why we're transparent. That's why I'm not concerned about inciting anything. People are going to do what they do. I'm concerned about transparency. I'm concerned about bringing clarity. I'm concerned about saying to people that this is what we're going to do. You have this right. You exercise your right. But here are the rules of you doing that. And the chief, who, when he said he was stuck in traffic because he was out there on the scene. He and his people are out there on the scene. And what they do, he uses his discretion at that moment as to whether or not somebody violates this or that. I think one of the things you did was not allow people to go on the shoreway. Sure, well, that was a discretionary decision made at that moment. It was based not because we didn't want them to protest, it was based on the fact that it would not be safe for them. So it's those kind of things. So no, I'm not concerned about that. If people want to come protest, more power to them. You know, it's their right. We don't have a problem with it. We welcome anybody who wants to bring grievance, and we just say you can't do harm to people and property. Why are you doing it?
Yesterday, the city law director was given a written request from a council member to review the Tamir Rice case and file charges.
Yeah.
How do you see the city dignifying that request? And there's really a very vague time frame as to when these
I appreciate you asking the question. I think the operative word here is, you said dignified the request. But I will say this, that the law department represents both city council and the administration. They just don't represent the administration. And there are many times that council asks the law department to do things, whether legislatively or otherwise. It could be around zoning, it could be around any kind of thing, that council person or that council becomes their client. Well, I think that's the dynamic here, that this is not coming from the administration, it's coming from a council person. The law department represents council and the administration, and I'm pretty sure the law director has already started a process of reviewing that request to see if, in fact, there is something in there that adds legitimacy to that request. And if it does, I'm pretty sure she will follow that route. If she believes that it does not, then I'm pretty sure she'll express that.
Don't you think she would have found it by now, though?
Well, no. You mean, how could you find something like that when it's taken all these months for the grand jury to come to a conclusion with reams of information and stuff like that? And to expect her to just immediately say, oh, no, that's not so or that's so. She doesn't know all. She knows what she knows, but she doesn't know all the facts that went to the grand jury. She doesn't know the entire investigative file of the police department, the county sheriff. But I do believe that what she'll probably do, and I don't know completely, but what I believe she'll probably do is look to see first, as she review it, if there is some merit. If she believes there is, she'll probably review all of the files that the grand jury reviewed.
Do you think those transcripts should be public like the NAACP?
The law is the law. The law is the law, and if people want to change that, then I think they should be able to do that. But the law is the law, and I guess by law that it is confidential.
Mayor, you talk about transparency, but there's also, for some of the public, there's the issue of expediency too. We're still looking at the administrative processes with the officers involved, even from the East Cleveland case. Expediency, transparency is one thing, but there's also the need that people need to know what is going to happen in these cases. Are we going to see, now that some of the criminal stuff is over with the Tamir Rice case, are we going to see a expediency or an urgency with some of the issues here?
I think the chief answered that. In my media availability the other day, I addressed that question. Our concern is due process. Due process. I could go through a process and have it expedient, or I could go through a process and have it drawn out for months. But if it doesn't have due process at its core, it's just a process that is just a matter of checking the box. That is what people are complaining about. So we will take whatever time is necessary in order to do this fairly, justly, due process at its core, to come to the right decision administrative. Now, that being said, we do recognize that there is a sense of urgency of people. And so we are balancing that sense of urgency with due process and combining those in a way that we will get this done in a time that we think is appropriate. Oh, no. If you were at the media availability, the director told you that he intends to review with me by the middle of January to East Cleveland. I mean, so it's very specific. So you don't have to ask me if it's going to be months. He already told you that. The chief, when that question was asked to the chief at the media availability, he says that they've already begun that process and that he can't put a time limit on it, but he assured us that he would not be prolonging this stuff unnecessarily, but he does want to ensure that due process is the core of what he does, not only in terms of the police officers, but in terms of the public. Look, the public is demanding fairness. The public is demanding justice. Is demanding these kinds of things. That's what the public is demanding, and we intend to do that. Now, what that outcome may be what the public demands. It may not be what the public demands. But the process itself will be due process. And that's what we intend to do. And we're not going to put a dollar amount on that. We're not going to put a time limit on that. We're not going to put a political consideration on that. We're going to move. The director will review with me in mid-January his recommendations on discipline with the 13 officers involved in the shooting in East Cleveland. The chief probably within a couple of weeks will be able to give me some sense as to what he believes the time period will be when he'll be able to give me a recommendation as to what he'll be doing. Okay?
Chief, when you're out there and you're giving these protesters leeway, are you considering that arresting someone for laying down and blocking traffic might just escalate things? Is that something that you and your officers are keeping in mind?
Well, again, from the beginning, we have not arrested anybody for just laying down in the streets. So we're not going to start that now unless there's a safety issue involved. We've given commands to people to do certain things and let them know if you don't comply, you will be arrested, and people have complied. So if it gets to the point where laying down in an intersection causes a safety issue and we give those commands and the people don't get up, they will be arrested.
So it sounds like there's a hard and fast rule. If there's a safety issue, there will be an arrest.
Exactly.
And it's safety for everyone.
Right.
Anybody else?
How many protesters do there have to be for there to be that police presence and escort? Because the first day, obviously, protesters took up both sides of the road. Yesterday, it was stay on one side of the road. And, I mean, how many people do there have to be?
We pretty much, if it's 10, if it's 100, if it's 50, of course that will determine how many you deploy. You know, but we try to support it in terms of the safety concern, balancing their rights with other things. We try to support, we try to be there when they're doing it, because it's very difficult to get something back under control once it's gotten out of control. And if you're not there on the ground with them, it creates a problem. So we try to be there. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes.
It does. So the size doesn't matter. It only what determines then is how many police officers and resources we deploy based on number. But the size doesn't matter either.
The type of protest doesn't.
Yeah, the type doesn't either. Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
yesterday the NAACP asked for a renegotiation
Right.
of the police union contract
Right.
in regard to consent issues
Right.
and the consent decree and in regard to negotiation, arbitration. So is that something the city is considering? Is that something?
Well, ma'am, we renegotiate contracts every 3 years, and this one's up next year. And we have a consent decree that has some provisions in it that says that we will enter into conversation with the unions to negotiate certain things. You know, and some of that stuff is around how long stuff is kept in the personnel file and things like that, part of what the NAACP talked about. So part of, we'll be negotiating next year. Now, the assumption that we have an arbitrary or unilateral ability to just change it is really false and is flawed, because we don't. Now, don't get me wrong. If the state wanted to give me, or somebody wanted to give me unilateral authority to put into a contract what I want to put in, I'll take that. But it just so happens that's not the case. And so what we have to do is follow state law, and we have to follow whatever the provisions are now. And then when we go into next year, probably in March or April, and we begin the negotiation process for the next 3 years, then these things can be considered. And if you read the consent decree has several areas in which we are looking at having that conversation, and some of those things are what the NAACP says. Now, they also mention about getting rid of arbitration. Well, again, that's part of the collective bargaining, but I will say that even if you got rid of arbitration, you wouldn't get rid of appeals process because they have a constitutional right to appeal through an administrative process that ultimately ends up in the court system. So the question is whether you have arbitrator as a way in which unions can grieve something, or you have an appeal to an administrative process that ultimately ends up in the court. But you can't get rid of the right to appeal disciplinary actions. So again, but I want to express to you, if you can be helpful for us, I wouldn't mind having just unilateral authority to say, well, this is in your contract, this is not, but I don't believe that's going to happen. But I will say this, that we are going to be entering into negotiation probably in March or April of next year. Some of the things in the consent decree have already been expressed about what we will begin to have a conversation with the unions about. Some of those things are about OPS, the complaints at OPS, whether they're anonymous or not. Another one is about the length of time some disciplinary actions stay inside your personnel folders, all those things. What is not in there, and which is getting rid of an arbitrator, and simply because you can get rid of an arbitrator, but you can't get rid of the process, the due process of the right to appeal. So it's a matter of whether you go to arbitrator or you go to an administrative process.
Would you consider asking to this, what they're asking, which is to get rid of the arbitrator?
Well, if the point here is, I don't know what the core of their ask there, if they think that the arbitrator has been too arbitrary in his decision around disciplines where we fired people and where we have demoted people or we suspended people without pay for days. And if they're talking about that aspect where the arbitrator has overturned those, you know, I'm in full support that I don't think they should have overturned those, you know. But if they mean that they want to get rid of the arbitrator so there cannot be appeal, they cannot do that, and neither can I. It's just the way it is. So if as a matter you don't like the outcome of what the arbitrator said, and you just think getting rid of the arbitrator gets rid of the appeal process, you can't get rid of the appeal process. Do I disagree with arbitrator's decision when we fire people, when we demote people, when we suspend them without pay and they overturn that? Yes, I disagree. I think I've been very vocal in that regard. So I don't know what they're asking for, what their intent is when they say get rid of arbitration. They may be talking about the overturning of those decisions, but if they're talking about getting rid of an appeal process, that you just can't do it by law.
But will you seek a different appeal process rather than an arbitrator?
I don't know. We have to wait until the collective bargaining thing comes down. Of course, I would like to have whatever process is that will support our administrative decisions. But I will tell you, you cannot be guaranteed that an administrative process that goes to a court is going to support your decision. You can't be guaranteed that the arbitrator is going to do that. You cannot guarantee that. That is the right and the purpose of having an appeals process that is not tainted. If why have an appeals process if you already know what the outcome is going to be? So I'm trying to say to you, either one of them works for me if in fact that they view it in a way that really looks at it, that helps to support our decision. I would take either one of them. But, you know, to think that one is going to be a better outcome for you than the other, that's being naive. It's not going to happen.
The protesters were saying understanding last night that they plan to be out marching the streets until both of the officers involved in the Tamir Rice shooting are off the force and the prosecutor is removed or is terminated. Is there any possibility that that might happen?
Well, you have to ask them. I don't know what their staying power is. I don't know what their tenacity is in terms of that. I know a lot of people profess things, including politicians, and that don't necessarily make it so as things unfold. But you would have to ask them, and I guess the proof would be in the pudding. As the gentleman asked, how long will it take for, we don't know. But if they have that kind of staying power and that tenacity, more power to them. I mean, I think it would show some commitment.
What about the so-called demands? Is there any possibility that
The what?
That the two officers involved in the Tamir Rice shooting will be removed from the force and that?
Well, again, see, ma'am, and this is what I'm trying to tell you. We deal with due process. Due process, meaning that everyone has a right to go through a process that's just and fair. Everybody. Right? If I would say to you yes, or if I say to you no, then all I would be doing is going through a process that and that's just going through the motions, because I've already decided. We are going to look at this in a due process way. And wherever that leads us and whatever conclusion we reach as a result of that is what we will do. I'm not trying to be political here, and I'm not trying to deny people their rights, just like on the appeals process, whether you have an arbitrator or you have an administrative process. Either one of those would work for me, but it doesn't guarantee an outcome. It doesn't, because if it did, it would be a flawed appeals process. Anybody else?
Mayor, what could make the process better? Not just with the officers, but what could make the process better that you could maybe assure the public that the police department is on the right track, that the transparency will continue? What kind of process would be the optimum thing?
We're already in that. We're already in. There's no one thing. People, that's where a lot of elected officials like myself and a lot of advocates that you're questioning me about have made a big mistake. They think that there's a panacea or a silver bullet. And if you just do this one thing or maybe two things, that everything will be okay and we can ensure the public that everything's going to be okay. It's not the case. This is about real reform. And that is one of the reasons why, well, the primary reason why I entered into a consent decree with the Department of Justice that was very specific about what our outcome measurements will be. It's real reform, not incremental stuff, but real reform that we believe can be sustained over a long period of time and has substance to it that would outlast a mayor or a police chief. There are other things that we've done outside the consent decree, even before we entered it, around the use of force, accountability for those officers who have used excessive force, body cameras. We're working on dash cameras. See, so we're doing a lot of things to moving towards that thing, that ultimate goal, where the public will believe that that there's a fair shake here. And that we're also moving towards that goal where those incidents that happen that maybe should not have happened or could have had a better outcome if someone did something different this way or that way. So you look at the training, you look at the policies, you look at your operation, and then you look at what technology and what tools you can provide officers to better ensure a better outcome of the interaction with citizens, and that we restore that confidence. And finally, we look at how do we as government, whether through the police department or the mayor's office or council, how do we interact with the public? How do we bring them in? How are we transparent with them? How do we interact with them so they become part, as the chief says, part of the solution as to what we need to do and work with us on that. So it's those three areas.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you.